My name is Jesel, and this is a presentation prepared for my Ethnic Studies 1 course. I'll be presenting a photograph of Mexican laborers who were part of the Bracero program. I obtained this photo from the Digital Public Library of America online. This photograph was taken on 1942 by Floyd Halleck Higgins. It was taken in Salinas, California. It depicts one of the first groups of Mexican workers, or braceros, to be hired. This particular group of braceros was hired in 1942 to help with the sugar beet harvest near Salinas, California. The Bracero program was a labor agreement between the U.S. and Mexico that ran from 1942 to 1964. It was created to address agricultural labor shortages during and after World War II. It employed millions of Mexican workers in the U.S. with contracts guaranteeing them certain rights and protections. In our week number 4 lectures, we learned about how race was used as a way to disproportionately define citizenship. We learned about how during World War II, the Japanese Americans were being sent to camps due to fears based on racism. During the same time, the U.S. was bringing in Mexican laborers under the Bracero program. Both groups faced exclusion. Japanese Americans were citizens, but they were still treated as enemies, while Mexican braceros were only welcomed for labor. They were both not integrated and didn't hold the same rights as American citizens. Braceros and Japanese Americans were both racialized as foreign and expendable labor. And if we go back, we can talk about how Japanese immigrants also helped build agriculture in California. Chinese and Mexican laborers also helped construct the Transcontinental Railroad. These Mexican and Japanese American laborers were called traqueros, but both of these groups of migrants were instrumental in building the expansion of the railroad throughout the U.S. Although both groups were essential to American infrastructure, they faced anti-immigration laws, segregation, labor exploitation. In our class, in a reading of a chapter from the book How Race is Made in America, Natalia Molina discusses how the main proponents for migrant laborers were employers in the fields where migrant workers were used the most. Although they heavily depended on migrant labor and migrant workers, they never accepted Mexicans or Asian migrant workers as members of society because they were, quote, an inferior race, unquote, and thus better suited for hard labor. Here, I've listed some anti-immigration laws that affected Japanese Americans and Mexican workers. These are the laws that affected Japanese Americans. The Chinese Exclusion Act from 1882. It didn't directly target Japanese, but it set the precedent for banning Asian immigrants based on their race. And it laid a foundation for excluding all of the Asian groups from citizenship and entry. And then there was the Immigration Act from 1924. It completely banned immigration from Asia, and this included Japan, and it actually defined Asians as racially ineligible for citizenship. And then there were the Alien Land Laws, 1913, 1920, and 1923 in California that barred aliens ineligible for citizenship. So this included Asian immigrants from owning or leasing land, and of course it directly targeted the Japanese farmers. And then these are some laws, some anti-immigration laws that affected Mexicans or Mexican workers. Immigration Act of 1917, it imposed a head tax and literacy test. It was aimed at targeting poor working class immigrants, including Mexicans. It created financial and educational barriers. And then the Operation Wetback from 1954, was a mass deportation campaign that removed over 1 million Mexicans, including U.S. citizens of Mexican descent. And this was even after the Bracero program had begun. Another one was No Path to Citizenship under the Bracero program. And this allowed for braceros to work, but they could not stay or become citizens. They were just viewed as disposable labor rather than future Americans. So we can see how both communities were exploited for labor, but they were always denied basic citizenship rights and protections. This photograph of the braceros arriving into an unknown land to work helps symbolize the long history of the U.S. using racialized labor, but still denying full integration into the nation. I think that understanding this part of history of the U.S. is essential in my education career because it will shape how I approach the topics of equity, immigration, labor rights in my teachings. I hope that as an educator, I'm able to help my students understand the importance of inclusion and to be able to equip them with the critical thinking skills that are required to challenge these ongoing social injustices. Thank you.